Hello, good morning. So we'll start the session. So let me introduce Bruce McLaren, the Lifetime Achievement Award for the AI Ed Society. So he will speak a few words before the award.
All right, thank you. Pleased to be here this morning. So as mentioned at the reception on Monday, I have the honor of presenting this year's awards for the Lifetime Achievement. And the AI Ed Society Lifetime Achievement Award recognizes members of our international community who throughout their careers have substantially advanced the science and engineering of AI in education. This year, 6 outstanding members of our community were nominated by the Executive Committee, the IJ AI Ed editors, and the Lifetime Achievement Award Committee, who you can see up here. And these same groups then voted to select this year's recipients. So our award committee was chosen to serve based on, first, their excellence as AI Ed researchers in their own right, and second, to balance geographic location and gender, as well as seniority. This award has been presented only 3 times previously, so a very prestigious award, and as you can see, the first award was in 2018. Our 2 recipients today, we have 2 recipients, join 3 giants of our field, John Self, Art Grazer, and Judy Kay. Their contributions help define AI in education and establish the foundation on which our community continues to build. As announced on Monday, our 6 nominees are Bandhu Balay, Christina Konadi, Ken Kadinger, Tanya Mitrovic, Richiro Mizoguchi, and Kurt Van Lane. Before announcing the winners, I want to re-emphasize, as I did on Monday, something important. Every one of these 6 nominees has helped shape the field we know today, creating foundational science, developing influential technologies, mentoring generations of researchers, leading our conferences and journals, and strengthening our international community. And the winners. Recipient 1 is Ken Kadinger of Carnegie Mellon University. I know Ken's here. Ken, do you want to come up to the stage, please? So over more than 3 decades, Ken Kadinger has profoundly shaped AI in education and educational data mining through pioneering research spanning cognitive science, educational psychology, and artificial intelligence. His early work on cognitive tutors demonstrated the transformative potential of AI to improve learning in real classrooms. Ken has since advanced the field through influential theories, innovative methods for student modeling, the creation of Data Shop, and his continuing work on hybrid human-AI tutoring. With more than 50,000 citations and an H-index exceeding 100, Ken's important influence on our field has been extraordinary. For his pioneering research, visionary leadership, and lasting impact on AI in education, it's my great honor to present the first 2026 AI Ed Society Lifetime Achievement Award to Professor Ken Kadinger. Please join me again in congratulating Ken. There you go. Well deserved, well deserved. Yeah. Want to say a word?
Oh, yeah. I wish I would have worn fancier shorts this morning. Didn't know what was happening now. I definitely don't have anything prepared here, but lots of thanks to tons of collaborators, really, over many years that have been critical to the work, but also really fun to work with and learn from. you know, as well as this community which has exploded in the last few years, which is quite exciting to have happen and be a part of. So, you know, let's continue to strive to do great work together. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Congratulations. Okay, our second winner, Kurt Van Lane. Over more than 3 decades, Kurt Van Lane has profoundly shaped artificial intelligence in education through pioneering research spanning cognitive science, artificial intelligence, and education. His groundbreaking work on intelligent tutoring systems, human tutoring, self-explanation, tutorial dialogue, and step-based tutoring transformed our understanding of how students learn and how AI can provide effective instructional support. Beyond his pioneering research, Kurt has made lasting contributions through his mentorship and leadership. For his pioneering research, enduring scholarship, and lasting influence on AI in education, it's my great honor to present the second 2026 AI Ed Society Lifetime Achievement Award to Professor Kurt Van Lane, who unfortunately is not with us today, but I will make sure that he receives his Lifetime Achievement Award. And with that, I'm going to hand this stage over to Min, who's going to introduce our speaker, Vincent. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, congratulations. It's amazing. And both my mentors got it. Thank you so much. And today, it's my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker. And as we can see, we are in the age of AI in the education. And we heard a lot of AI renovate education. We also heard the test score went down, and student cheating, and some school try to ban AI from the classroom. So what is it? So today's keynote speaker and our Vincent, Aleven, is try to not take a side. Rather, he tried to see what his research is show and what his school see. And he tried to do something to close the gap. So Vincent is a professor from HCI Carnegie Mellon, and he has over 300 publications, a lot of 12 best paper awards, and 25 substantial grants. And his vision is inspire a lot of us. And today, what amazed me about Vincent is he basically introduced tutoring system, and then he also see what's happening in tutoring system in school. He saw there's the teachers overwhelming, and also there's the peers, there's the parents, and also there's a human tutor through the videos. So today he's going to share some of his insight about his project, and hopefully to shape us what we think in this age, what AI in education really means. Let's welcome Vincent, Aleven.
So good morning, everybody, and what a thrill to be here. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here. I can echo Min and congratulate the Lifetime Achievement Awards, also 2 of my mentors, believe it or not. And it's great to see how the field has grown, to see that we're in such a big auditorium. It makes sense, right? Education has always been important. AI is now incredibly important, so the combination should be important and should be the subject of good research. So my topic today is how can we make sure that AI Ed serves all students, advantaged but also disadvantaged students. And in fact, this should have been the title of my talk. So if we ask the question, what is today's most pressing ethical issue for AI in education? Well, our field has actually produced a lot of scholarship on that topic, including this edited volume you see here. And one of the chapters, Ken Holstein and Chayanda Rudy framed the question as follows: will AI Ed amplify or alleviate inequities in education? And there are, of course, plenty of inequities, just as one example to illustrate from the American educational system, but the American system is not at all unique in this regard. This graph shows you test scores in grade 8, math test scores, which American students are tested every year. And these graphs, so they show over the years, large gaps between, for example, the test scores of white and black students. You see those two lines are far apart and show no sign of getting closer. So these gaps are persistent. And equally, although harder to see, we see a large gap between the economically disadvantaged and those who are not. Like if comparing the top graph and the bottom, they actually have different y-axes that makes it a little harder to see. And this is a story about America, about 8th grade math, but this manifests itself in so many ways, in so many places around the world. And researchers, of course, have taken notice and have called this the Matthew effect. For example, Justin Reich in his excellent book, this sort of phenomenon that those who are ahead tend to stay ahead or even get ahead more and more. The rich get richer, as it is sometimes called. And Justin devotes an entire chapter to writing about the EdTech Matthew effect. And what might that look like in data? Well, that question is addressed in a paper in that same volume by Renee Kozelchik and Lee. If we look at the learning of two groups of students, one we consider advantaged and one disadvantaged, as they go through a piece of instruction, we might see that they learn equally much, so the gap remains constant. We might see that the advantaged group learns more, the gap widens. Well, that would be considered a Matthew effect and considered an unfair result. What we'd like to see in this analysis is that the gap closes. That would be seen as fair. Now, while this seems like hard to disagree with this analysis, I nonetheless wanted to raise one caveat and maybe add some nuance. What this analysis doesn't do is compare against what the situation would be if there was no AI Ed, if we assume that these graphs were obtained with some AI Ed system. But what if the students didn't have the AI Ed? So let's think that through. So here we have an EdTech Matthew effect, let's say obtained with an intelligent tutoring system. So comparing students with lower prior knowledge and higher prior knowledge, and the gap widens as they work with the system. Okay, so you might say that's not what we want. But what if business as usual, like learning without an intelligent tutoring system, looked like this? Okay, so comparing those two graphs, we see that students learn, not only do students learn more with the intelligent tutoring systems, although in both cases the gap widens, but it widens more with business as usual instruction. So what at first sight looks like an undesirable Matthew effect actually doesn't look so bad when compared to the alternative. Students learn more with the intelligent tutoring systems, and although the gap widens, it doesn't widen as much. So if we would reject intelligent tutoring systems just based on this pattern on the left, there is a real chance of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Now, there's no question that we would like to see this gap be more narrow. So I would say we could, and even with this situation, and it's hypothetical, right? This is not real data. We should prefer the intelligent tutoring system, but continue to work to make sure that this gap widening doesn't occur as much as possible. And that's what this talk is about. How can we do so? So I will address that in 3 steps. First, I'll look at what might we expect from AI Ed as it is. What might be theoretical reasons for why we might expect that AI Ed in its current form will help all students equally. Then I'll look at what the data will say, what has found so far. We have a large empirical literature. And then my final part, where can we go? What new forms of AI Ed might we create that can enhance equity? And I'll show you some examples from my research in my lab that have promising results in that regard. And as I treat these questions, I will focus mostly on the design of learning environments and not on access to computing devices or the internet. That, of course, is a big factor that has a lot to do with inequities So a big shout out to the folks who are working on ITS Unplugged. I think that's a super important line of research, but I will not touch that. I will focus on AI-based tutoring systems as a key form of AI ed, partly and mostly they're used in K-12, so in elementary, middle, and high school, because that's where my research has been, and also that's where AI ed systems have seen a large amount of use in real education. And in terms of equity, I will look at equity with respect to students' socio-economic conditions, but that kind of data isn't always available, so I will also look at whether prior knowledge, whether students with lower prior knowledge are at a disadvantage or not. So part one, what might we expect from AI ed as it is? Why or why not might intelligent tutoring systems improve educational equity? And just as a little bit of background, these images right here that I got from the company Carnegie Learning illustrate the common use scenario of these tutoring systems in schools. So students are working on the software in school. The teacher is there to help those who might need more help. The students work at their own pace, mostly through a sequence of workspaces or problem sets. And although the teacher sets milestones, my impression is that those tend to be treated more as soft goals than really as strict deadlines. And this work, so the images illustrate the Mathia software that came out of, that was by the company Carnegie Learning, which came out of a line of research at Carnegie Mellon that was started in John Anderson's lab. And you see some of the researchers here who were responsible for that. Now, to theorize about effectiveness of intelligent tutoring systems, let's first say what we mean by that term. And I would say three features are critical of intelligent tutoring systems. First of all, a high level of adaptive support within complex problems. So what Kurt Van Leen, one of our new awardees from today, would call the inner loop. Second is mastery learning, by which students must demonstrate mastery of one topic before they can go on to the next. So what Kurt would call the outer loop. Excuse me. And finally, it's not just smart technologies and AI adaptivity, but it's also and critically well-designed content and scaffolding. So I see these as the three critical elements. And just to illustrate, here is an old tutoring system, Math Tutor, that Bruce McLaren, my colleague, and I built with the help of many, many people. This is what a problem for 7th grade math might look like at the start. A story, and the students work through multiple representations. And this quick animation illustrates this adaptive inner loop that provides feedback in red and green. It provides error messages in the bottom left. It gives hints when the students ask for them. And critically, it has the effect that the student succeeds in solving a rather complex and elaborate problem that, that might have been too hard without some of this help along the way. Now, the adaptive outer loop, so the mastery learning is hard to see, but suffice it to say here that the system keeps track of students' knowledge growth in the skill meter. Oh, hi, Bruce. So Bruce helped with building this system. So now let's look at why might such a system actually enhance equity? Why might it help lower performance more than other students? So going back to our three features, I would say the high level of adaptive support in problems helps students succeed even if they come in with somewhat lower prior knowledge. They get help along the way. The mastery learning makes sure they get the right amount of practice, even if they start low. So they may have to do some more work, but the system will give them enough work to reach mastery. And finally, the well-designed content and scaffolding will make sure that the practice is effective and targets the right content. So all good reasons why we think this software, at least in theory, might help many students. Reasons against, well, mostly it's time. Mastery learning, although it means that students get the time to work up to mastery, requires more time from those who start with lower prior knowledge. But even with, oh, thank you, sir. Even with good support, it is hard to catch up. You have to put in the time, and it may well be that the students who start low actually are the least supported in doing so. They might receive less support from their teachers, from their family, whereas what is needed is that they put in more time. So just to summarize, theoretically, I don't see strong reasons why we should expect that intelligent tutoring systems, the way we typically use them in schools, which I described before, will reduce achievement gaps. They offer strong support, so that's the good news. But it may just be hard for the disadvantaged students to put in the extra time to catch up. Now, to what degree is that analysis borne out by empirical studies? So I'll be throwing many numbers at you, so get ready. And mostly they come from meta-analyses. So I think one of the great accomplishments of AI Ed as an empirical science is that by now we have a rather large set of meta-analyses that summarize the results of many studies that tested the effectiveness of intelligent tutoring systems. So this slide shows you results of 7 of those meta-analyses. There are more, but I selected a subset, some very recent ones, as you can see, and some older ones. You may be familiar with some. And just for starters, let's look at the question of whether intelligent tutoring systems used, as they currently are, improve student learning over a non-ITS instruction. And basically all these meta-analyses, although they analyzed different numbers of studies and came up with different average effect sizes for ITS instruction over other instruction, answer this question in the positive. Summarizing doing the meta-analysis of meta-analyses, we would say that for the general student population, intelligent tutoring systems provide a meaningful advantage over other forms of instruction. But that is for the student population at large, for all students. And our question was, what about the disadvantaged students? So that question is addressed in 2 of those meta-analyses. One, the Ma et al. From 2014, who in one analysis divided up students based on their prior knowledge level, so looked at studies that had done that, distinguishing between low, medium, high, and varied, just based on the description in the meta-analyzed papers, and came to the conclusion that the effectiveness of intelligent tutoring systems does not vary depending on students' prior knowledge. They serve students equally well, regardless of prior knowledge, except they didn't have the number of studies to come up with a solid conclusion about what about students with high prior knowledge. And a similar result was obtained in this meta-analysis by Lighty et al. From 2025. They divided up the studies into those addressing students with low prior knowledge versus not low, and again came to the conclusion that there is no statistically significant difference in the effectiveness of intelligent tutoring systems between the low and the not low group. They also did a variety of other analyses looking at the effects of intelligent tutoring systems for disadvantaged groups, including low achievers, English language learners, students in poverty, and the general population. And the short conclusion here, there was a positive, statistically significant effect size for the low achievers. So they recommend using intelligent tutoring systems for the low achievers. And the effect sizes were somewhat similar across disadvantaged groups. We do, however, see a positive effect size for students in poverty. It was not significant. I would contrast that, though, with some recent studies that showed that with a widening gap in the effectiveness of ITSs between the lower SES and higher SES students, although I should also say that those studies compared higher and lower students without also comparing them to alternative instruction, as per my analysis in the beginning of the talk. And then finally, the same meta-analysis compared students across different school settings, particularly dividing up the samples in urban and suburban, students who might just encounter different circumstances in their schools, depending on the location. That tends to correlate, and found that, that although the effect sizes were positive and significant for all 3 groups, it's clear that the students in the rural schools were worse off, had only half the effect size of urban and suburban schools. And actually, both Ma and Lighty criticize our community for the lack of consistent and transparent reporting on student characteristics in our primary ITS research, which made it harder for them to do these meta-analyses. So that is sort of a mandate for us researchers to report as much as we can about our samples when we publish studies, with an eye on later meta-analysis. Now switching gears a little bit, I would like to show a study by my colleagues. In fact, the first author just received an award. Who looked at this question of for whom do intelligent tutoring systems work in a different way, namely through educational data mining. So they said their driving question at the beginning was like, why do some students learn faster than other students? That's a question we might all have pondered at some point. And their approach was to take 28 data sets from different forms of educational technology, and many of those came from intelligent tutoring systems. And in order to identify those faster students, they did statistical modeling. You may be familiar with the IFM logistic model that models learning rates over successive practice opportunities. And in fact, they use the IFM version so they could get an estimate of students' individual learning rates. The surprising result was that there wasn't much variability in the learning rates among students. All students learn equally fast in a well-supported technology-based environment. This surprised them, so they put the title is An Astonishing Regularity in Student Learning Rates. And the profound consequences of that is that achievement gaps that we see, and we see plenty as I illustrated, may be driven mostly, at least in these well-supported environments, by differences in opportunities to learn, and maybe less so by inherent differences in how fast students learn. So that is actually a very optimistic message, especially so students can learn with intelligent tutoring systems, and it clearly holds out the hope that intelligent tutoring systems could be used to reduce these gaps. It doesn't actually show it in this data, but it shows a promise. So to summarize the empirical evidence, mostly from meta-analyses, for the student population as a whole, intelligent tutoring systems are meaningfully more effective than other instruction, and they are so for, regardless of students' level of prior knowledge. We do see, however, that for rural and lower SES students, it isn't so clear that intelligent tutoring systems are equally effective. On the other hand, it does look like all students can learn. So I would not take away from this picture that intelligent tutoring systems somehow by their very nature cannot help students in poverty or in rural areas. I think it's more, this data reflects more their circumstances where there isn't enough support around the intelligent tutoring systems. And so if that is true, so if intelligent tutoring systems have great potential to help all learners, but are often used in ways that do not help those who are left behind, what might we do to make sure that they are used in better ways, in ways that help the students catch up so that there is an equalizing force? And the way I've approached that in researching my lab is to take a broad view of AI Ed, not just the student and the tutoring system, and not even the orchestration level defined by Ben de Boulay in this 2019 paper, which includes the teacher. But I view the smart classroom as an ecosystem with students at the center and then several other stakeholders, all in the role of facilitators of learning, helpers of students, such as the teacher, of course, but also human tutors, the parents and caregivers in their roles of guiding and encouraging and cajoling and maybe holding accountable their students, and peers involved in collaborative learning activities can also be viewed as facilitators. And then my question is, can we create new forms of human-centered AI Ed to extend or improve upon the standard use scenarios of intelligent tutoring systems that I described, where students work at their own pace in class, where maybe soft deadlines set by the teacher? What can we do to make that, to create a sort of more favorable conditions, especially for those students who have further to go? And I've been, so I would propose we keep what's good, intelligent tutoring systems represented by this arrow, And we see if we can create new forms of AI-ED that support the other helpers, the other facilitators, the teacher in the first place, but also the human tutors, the parents and caregivers, and the peers. And my lab has done projects exploring all of these arrows. And today I would like to share some promising results from 3 projects. So let's start by creating AI-ED for supporting the teachers. And this is actually what I'll be showing you as a sequel to work that this community has seen before, a project that we have been rebooted. So as mentioned, teachers in the smart classroom of today have a challenging task. They must, as the students are working on the software in a self-paced manner, they must monitor the class and provide one-on-one help where needed. But how could teachers know who needs help the most? Of course, they'll reply to students' help requests, but it's well known from the literature on help seeking that students' help requests don't always accurately reflect the need for help. And in particular, lower performing students or struggling students might be inclined to sort of hide their struggle, not share that with the teacher. And so we were thinking, well, what about analytics from the tutoring software if the teacher had those in real time? And this became the dissertation work of Ken Holstein, with involvement also from Bruce McLaren. So he came up with Lumilo, which is a mixed reality tool that shows teachers real-time analytics about students, so they are more aware of who might be in need of help. So here you see photos of the old version of Lumilo. This is about 8 years ago. We had the Microsoft HoloLens, pretty bulky hardware, as you can tell. And here you see Lumilo in action. What the teacher sees through these glasses is that above each student head, there is an indicator showing how they are doing. Capturing just a small number of indicators capturing various states that I'll show you in a minute. And they could also request further information, a deep dive for any particular students, which showed a sort of live feed of the student screen, so here shown on the right, and also an overview of what the student might be struggling with in terms of the skills, where there might be some wheel spinning, so repeated practice not leading to much payoff in terms of greater mastery, and some of the errors that the student had been making. And so the indicators are just 5. So these set of indicators were developed in design with teachers, and it includes misusing the software, unproductive struggle and milder forms of struggle, idleness, so not being active in the software, and teachers also insisted that they would know when students were doing well, just to not become depressed about their students, but also that they could celebrate their successes. And I mentioned human-centered AI, so designing with teachers is incredibly important as we create new AI-ed systems. Lumilo was created through an extensive, I think a 1.5 year long process working with teachers in which Ken Holstein discussed concept design ideas with them, prototypes of various levels of fidelity. Here you see plastic glasses there on the desk on the left, and he showed in Photoshop on his screen what it would look like if the teacher put on the glasses, just to get their initial reactions to this idea before we had even bought a mixed reality device. So we have continued this project. So we're working at the moment with Carnegie Learning. We use LiDAR hardware. We did a pilot study in a school system, a school district, this December, and the local news got wind of the project.
New at 7 in Sussex County, Georgetown Middle School math teachers are trying out a new tool in the classroom, technology-assisted learning. WBOC's Alexis Grease dropped into class to try the augmented reality glasses on for size and see what they're really all about.
Melanie Ramirez is a 7th grader at Georgetown Middle School and says these glasses support her confidence in getting help from her teacher.
That feels much better than raising your hand in front of everybody and everybody just staring at you.
Imagine you have some shy students here working on math problems that maybe don't want to raise their hand for help. Well, the teachers can put on these augmented reality glasses and see exactly what students around the classroom need assistance.
When the students are working on their online Mathia program, the teachers put on augmented reality glasses and can see, with symbols like question marks or smiley faces, which students need help. Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University selected Georgetown Middle School after a few teachers showed interest to pilot this program. Teacher Brittany Rummel has already noticed the difference.
It is helping them kind of open up even more, and they're like, oh, my teacher sees me, they are here to help me, I don't have to be shy, and it's helping them learn how to advocate for themselves and ask questions when needed. It gives them the door to do that.
And while the students say the glasses felt a little silly at first, they enjoy taking on something new.
I like them so much because, like, if you're embarrassed to, like, raise your hand, so the teachers already know that you need help because of the question mark, so it's like, oh, they know, and then you don't have to raise your hand or just be waiting the whole time.
Seeing solutions to helping students through a new lens. In Sussex County, Alexis Grease, WBOC News, Delmarva's news leader.
Pretty interesting. The researchers at Carnegie Mellon say they plan to continue to collect data and feedback from the use of the glasses until they come back in the spring to pick them up there in Sussex County.
So this, I don't know about you, but I sort of feel this palpable sense of excitement in the schools about the use of these glasses. In fact, I've never seen teachers so excited about new technology in the classroom. I've been in classrooms a lot over the years. We actually did not pick up those glasses in the spring. We did come back, collected more data, and we still left the glasses there because the teachers wanted to continue to use the glasses even after the research study was over. Well, they first had to do state tests, but then after that, they wanted to come back. So they still have the glasses, and we are excited that they have because over the summer, we can continue to work with them. But just to illustrate, teacher said, like, these glasses really engage me way more than I am on a typical Mathia day. They make me more productive. So a real sense of excitement. Now you might ask, okay, that is nice, but what about student learning, and what about, in particular, the lower performing students? Well, here I'm going back to a study that Ken Holstein published in 2018, where he studied the use of the old version of Lumelo against two control conditions. I'll just focus on the control condition where the teacher doesn't have a similar tool. So the study had 18 classes and 8 teachers randomly assigned to those conditions. So the results were actually quite remarkable. When the teacher has the smart glasses, we can measure that teachers devote more time to the students who have more to learn. So if you compare in this graph the red line, which represents the Lumelo condition, against the blue line, which represents what I've labeled as business as usual, so no Lumelo. And the graph shows the time spent that the teacher spent with the student as the function of the pretest. You see that the red line is very high on the lower end of the pretest. Students with low pretests get a lot of attention. The class as a whole learned 3 times as much when students have Lumelo. And especially the students who had more to learn benefited. So here again, the red line, so this is the post-test scores as a function of the pretest score. So again, if you look at the low pretest score students, the red line, which represents Lumelo, is higher. So definitely evidence that this kind of teacher tool can serve as an equalizing force in the classroom. And it's actually quite interesting to ponder why this might be. Why is it? Like, so the data shows students who need more help got more help, but it's still only a little bit of help, right? There is one teacher, there are 20, 25 students. So how can it be so effective? So you would have to think that there is also a matter of visibility, accountability, maybe feeling cared for. You saw the student comments in the video. And so there are still some interesting open questions of how actually do these effects come about. We're currently working on scaling Lumelo together with Carnegie Learning. I won't narrate the slide other than to say we're using with many people. We're running studies, so you'll hear more from us in the years to come. Now let's move on to a second project where we focus on how new human-centered AI could help all students in the smart classroom. And now we focus on human tutors. And the project is called Plus. Ken Kadinger is the PI. I'm a co-PI, and it focuses on hybrid human tutoring. So we've seen intelligent tutoring systems can be very effective. We also know from the literature that human one-on-one tutoring is one of the most, if not the most, effective way of learning. But unfortunately, it's expensive and therefore doesn't scale. But might it be possible to have effective yet affordable use of human tutoring in the context of students working with AI-based tutoring software? So that's the idea behind hybrid human AI tutoring. Might small amounts of time of a human tutor help students get more out of their use of AI software? So the situation is that students, as before, use this software in class, but remote human tutors who are trained college students, so not what you would call professional students, stand by remotely, visit the students over Zoom or some other teleconferencing software, and usually one of those tutors serves about 4 students. And this is what that looks like for a student in class. So this is during class time. The student works on the tutoring software, and we have tried this with many softwares, and a human tutor is standing by and tunes in for a brief tutoring session during class time. So that's why the student was wearing headphones. And we had to build many forms of new human-centered AI to make this happen. For example, the human tutors have a new dashboard where they can see how the students that they are assigned to are doing and how they might help them. Who needs math help more? Who might need motivational help more, for example. Another way in which we're using AI is in the scenario-based online tutor training. So these tutors are untrained, may have some experience in tutoring, but no formal training. So we developed scenario-based training, and we use LLMs to give students feedback on their thoughts of how they would act in certain scenarios, hypothetical scenarios that are presented to them. And increasingly, we're also using multimodal LLMs to generate feedback on human tutors. So these are all new forms of AI ed to support more, to involve and support more helpers in this classroom ecosystem. And so does it work? Like, do students learn more? And in particular, do the students with lower baseline ability, with lower prior knowledge, benefit more? We've done several studies. The short answer is yes, we do have some evidence that this actually works especially well for the lower performing students. It was also designed for them in the first place. One study involved 3 schools with a total of 585 students in grade 7 and it's it has this interrupted time series design, meaning it compared data from the tutoring system, so students' progress, the amount of time they spend from before the hybrid tutoring started. So students were just working with the tutoring system in the business as usual manner against what happened once the tutoring started and they were visited on a regular basis by these remote tutors. And the results show that for the whole group of students, the hybrid tutoring yielded both greater engagement and greater learning than just working with the software without the remote human tutor. So students spend more time and learn more skills based on metrics taken from the software. And in particular, the lower performing students seem to benefit more from the hybrid human AI tutoring than their higher performing peers. Now, why might that be so? Why might this form of hybrid tutoring be especially helpful for those lower performing students? Just like with Lumino, we don't have a complete answer to that question, but we do have some ideas for why it might be. One might simply be that the tutors would naturally spend more time with the students, with the lower performing students, because maybe there was more to explain, more to talk about. So it might have happened just in a natural way. Furthermore, and maybe also just like Lumino, maybe the mere awareness that a tutor was coming may have raised engagement, and this may have happened especially for the lower performing students whose baseline engagement may not have been high. And you could also conjecture that the relationship building and social emotional support that these human tutors were trained to do as they in their weekly interactions with students might be especially valuable to these lower performing students who might not be used to getting a lot of support in their academic pursuits. I think there is interesting work to be done to sort of try to tease these possibilities apart, but one conclusion stands, which is that this hybrid human AI tutoring appears to promote educational equity, and I'm hedging a little bit, partly because of this quasi-experimental experimental design, the interrupted time series. And now moving on to my third and final projects, where we're trying to figure out how human-centered AI ed might be brought into this classroom ecosystem. And here again, we're focusing mostly on those we're focusing on students, human tutors, and with a side exploration with parents and caregivers. This is based on the dissertation work of Conrad Borges, who is probably in the audience somewhere. Yeah, he's sitting there, over there. He just finished, so his big question in his dissertation was, well, what if we made sure that the students, when they work with this AI-based tutoring software, have concrete goals for their practice? And what if we made sure we supported them in setting goals, tracking goals, and reaching their goals? So that yields interesting implementation questions, like how would we do that in this hybrid human tutoring ecosystem? Like what kind of help do students need to set reasonable goals, like not too hard, but also not too easy, to achieve those goals, to track them, maybe adjust the goals as it turns out that they are too hard or too easy. And moreover, what effect might that have if we did that? And would it help lower performing students the most? So Conrad, as part of his dissertation, did a lot of design-based research with students, teachers, parents, caregivers, to figure out what adaptive goal support might look like in this particular ecosystem, and he also conducted several classroom studies to test the effect. So a central idea here is that students would sign a very formal-looking math practice contract in which they commit to goals for their practice with the tutoring software. So here, for example, the student agrees solemnly to spend 30 minutes practicing per week on the tutoring software, and also to master 5 skills in the software. So that's where the goals are set. Conrad also developed support for these human tutors. So remember, this is embedded in the hybrid human AI tutoring environment. So the dashboard for the human tutors was extended so that human tutors knew about students, how well students were doing with their goals, whether their goals were met or not met. And then the tutor training was extended so that the tutors were trained to provide praise and encouragement if students made their goals, and also have sort of important discussions with them when the goals were not met, where they would ask students to reflect. When students would express inadequacy about their math learning, that's a very important moment for those tutors so that they could encourage them and encourage them not to give up and to keep trying and so forth. A final critical component of the adaptive tutoring support: rewards. Healthy fruit snacks for meeting your goals every week. So a little bit of external motivation. So in one study with 110 middle school students, working with the IXL math software, this is a widely used math software in the US, the procedure was to track students over 12 weeks, where goal support, so over those 12 weeks there was this hybrid human AI tutoring, but the goal support started in the middle of the 12 weeks, so we can compare what happens before the goal support and after. And quite remarkably, with the goal support, students practiced 25% more time and mastered 40% more skills, sort of disproportionately more skills. So more time spent, and apparently also the time was spent more effectively. So evidence that this goal support could help students, and in this case, all students, there was no. But in the second study, the question was addressed, well, what about the lower performing students? So here he added, Conrad, the some adaptive goal adjustments. So all those components that I showed you before were kept. So the contracts, the tutor dashboard, the rewards, of course. But in addition, at the midpoint of this goal-setting period, or the goal support period, there was another formal-looking document handed to students, which told them how well they were doing with respect to their goals. So let's say they had said, I'll practice for 20 minutes, but they actually practiced for 30. And then if there was a discrepancy, whether the performance was lower than the goal or higher than the goal, then there was a recommendation to adjust the goal. So here they were splitting the difference. So the recommendation says 25 minutes. Now again, and I didn't emphasize this before, even when setting the goals, the students are in charge. They get to decide their goals. So in that sense, it preserves the student autonomy. And also in the goal adjustment, the student autonomy is preserved. So here, the student, they could just reject the suggestion, they could accept it wholesale, or they could modify it. And this was added because in the prior study, it was found that once a student met a goal, they would then be much more likely to also meet the goal in subsequent weeks. So it's important to help students set attainable goals. That is mostly why this was added. So in another study, again with IXL, with hybrid human AI tutoring and IXL involving 184 students, two conditions were compared. There was again a third condition that I'll ignore. So these adaptive student set goals that have all the components that I just described. So the goal contract, the dashboard, the rewards, and the sort of goal feedback document at the midway point were compared against hybrid human AI tutoring without goal support. And our question now is, do students learn better? And in particular, what about lower achieving students? So the results show that the adaptive goal support led to more practice time and more skills practice, just as in the previous experiment. But it also, in an additional analysis, Conrad looked at whether students, comparing students based on their baseline effort. So in other words, the amount of time and the amount of skills mastered in the tutoring system prior to the goal support. And he saw that the students who prior to the goal support put in the least effort actually benefited the most from the goal support. So again, some evidence of an equalizing power of this new form of AI-ED. And again, we might ask, well, why might this adaptive goal support benefit lower performing students especially? It may have helped them regulate their effort better, which they might need more than other students. It had resulted in them using the available practice time more and more effectively. Perhaps those rewards, the fruit snacks, were also having a bigger effect for these students than for the higher effort students who basically didn't have as much room for improvement. And there's even the possibility that the success that they had in attaining their goals may have had strong motivational effects. It may have boosted their self-efficacy, persistence, and interest. So, as a conclusion about this third project, this sort of calibrated, autonomy-preserving, adaptive goal support that are described looks like a promising lever for reducing some of the inequalities, the disparities that we see in our technology-enhanced learning environments. So that brings me to my final thoughts. So I started with the question, how can we make sure that AI Ed serves all students? And reviewing the literature, we came to the conclusion that intelligent tutoring systems show great promise for many students, but maybe not for all, and that the rural and lower SCS students may not benefit as much. I don't think the literature is actually very definitive about this, so more work in that area, I think, would really be helpful. But nonetheless, there is sort of a sense of great promise that isn't fully realized yet. And to realize this potential, I proposed that we create new roles for human-centered AI Ed that are focused primarily on making the use of what works already more effective, and doing so by bringing in more facilitators, more helpers in the classroom ecosystem. And you might say it's sort of a way of caring more for the students, but also holding them accountable more. And I showed you some promising evidence that the lower performing students benefit. Again, we could definitely use more evidence, but the initial returns are promising. And so to come back to the big issues that I started with, the inequities in the educational system worldwide are serious and challenging and have resisted solution for a long time. And while this is not purely a function of the educational system, I would say AI has tremendous potential to improve education. It's going to take investment in societal will and political will, perhaps, but maybe some of these ideas that I presented here today and the better versions of these ideas that I'm sure you as a community will develop will give us as a community a leg up in contributing to the solution of these hard problems. So a great big thanks to all my collaborators. I've mentioned many in the slides, and it's truly been a blessing. It's truly been inspiring to work with all of you. I would also like to thank this community for their sort of great energy and attention that they bring to, and the willingness to take on these hard challenges that we have in the world and try to make a difference. I take a lot of inspiration from that, and I hope you will continue to put in that energy, and hopefully we can make AI Ed make a difference. So hamsanida. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we started late, so we will have 10 minutes for Q&A. Any questions? Raise your hand, and please, yes.
Thanks for sharing a very impressive body of research. Really, very inspiring. My question is, have you documented in any of these studies what it is that the teacher or tutors do to help them? And maybe some of that can be automated in modifying things.
Yes, yeah, great question. I mean, the short answer is that is future work, mostly. I'm super curious what happens in these interactions between teachers and students, tutors and students. I'm also curious, by the way, as mentioned, about what happens outside of those interactions, because it does seem like this sort of being in an environment with greater care and also maybe a little bit more accountability, maybe a little bit more of agency, might in itself have benefits. So I do think there are sort of really interesting open questions there that we could dig in further. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Nathan Ong. I'm from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I actually attended a talk by you at LRDC several years ago. Wow. So I just wanted to thank you again for this amazing talk. So I just want to preface this by saying that I want to apologize that what I'm about to say might sound like I don't support your efforts, but that's not the case. But when you showed the graphs showing the learning gains using intelligent tutoring systems, and to show that we wanted to make things more equitable, it made it seem like those that were higher performing or higher achieving students were not getting as much learning gain out of it in comparison. So the slope of the graph was lower than what it might have been if there was no sort of equitable attempt there. So I just wanted to ask, how would you present it to some of these teachers or parents of those that have high achieving students, that they should be supporting these types of initiatives when it might seem to them that they're losing out on maximizing their students' potentials?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with your concern that as we focus on the lower achieving students, we shouldn't forget the other students. If these were the graphs you were referring to, though, I don't see any evidence in these graphs that the higher performing students were at a disadvantage. Like the benefits of Lumilo over just use of the tutoring software, I will say, go mostly to the lower performing students, as you can see in this graph on the right, if you compare the red and blue lines. But the higher performing students end up where they would be ending up anyway, I think. So it doesn't hurt them in any way.
So just to clarify, I mean, looking at the green line, for example, where it says classes but no analytics, right? The higher pre-test scores seem to exceed those of Lumino. So it might, you know, for someone who has a high achieving student, they might say, well, then I don't want Lumilo, just do the one with no analytics because it helps my kid more.
Yeah. Now you ask me, is that difference statistically reliable? And I must say, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember that, to be quite honest. So I think you can summarize this as, we should go back to this paper and check. But I think we can summarize this by saying that that nobody was hurt. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yes. So it turned out that we have more time, so until we have 15 more minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the intriguing talk and the ideas about supporting other stakeholders around the student, which is really refreshing to hear and to see the research about. My name is Hassan, I'm from University of Frankfurt, and I was wondering about another topic which might be adjacent to the use of Lumilo in classrooms. Have you studied or evaluated the effect of using these observational tools on the students' anxiety of being more observed? We have seen some students excited about it, but does that represent the opinion of all students? Have you done any research or evaluation on that front? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a really important question. Like I showed you mostly data from teachers. What about the students? What do they think of Lumilo? Yeah. That too is work in progress. We have done some work interviewing students as well. And in fact, some of this work has fed into the design. So for instance, students asked what kinds of analytics would they be comfortable if their teacher had them. Didn't seem to object to the teacher knowing about their learning progress, which makes some amount of sense since the teacher had that anyway. Like maybe more detail with software for sure, but even without software, the teacher keeps tabs of students' progress, and I think this is critical. I did see a study presented in this conference actually that asked the question of what. Actually, I'm going down the wrong path here. Let me come back to the students. So the short question is, it's mostly work in progress, but we have done surveys with students, what they think. Yes, the newscast shows some enthusiastic students, but who knows what the other students would be thinking. My sense overall is that that there was also a sense of excitement among the students, but that not everybody was enthralled. And yeah, in this human-centered approach that I've been advocating to designing tools that we want to put out in the classroom, that is to be taken very seriously. So that is definitely a focus of ongoing conversation, investigation.
Great. I think, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for the great presentation. Especially I enjoyed the fact that with your goal setting, you show that the power of change of students is within themselves. Okay, so you talked a lot about the hopes of AI Ed. Let's talk about, you know, there is an easy anxiety of AI Ed when the teachers feel that like the AI may teach better than them. So the question is, how can we, like, are there some inspiration we can reuse for helping teachers get more agency and like when, especially in the case where they are forced by their institutions to use the AI tools and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you raise important issues like what about teacher agency? What about teachers' sense of competence compared to AI tools that we might put in the classroom and so forth. And so one part of the answer is really this approach is focused on bringing in more humans into the classroom and supporting them. Our investigation of teacher agency so far suggests that teachers actually feel empowered by the glasses. It makes them feel more involved in the classroom, makes them feel more active. And yeah, so all the examples that I've shown are really focused on not replacing teachers. I'm very much in favor of keeping the human element, and I think also, as I've tried to say in these thoughts about why the different interventions had their effects, I think part of it is just human empathy and care, but also a level of accountability. Yeah, so that actually sounds like very old school in terms of what good teaching might accomplish. So I see this really more as supporting humans rather than in any way replacing, augmenting their awareness, perhaps their decision-making to some degree, but never in a way that they feel that their autonomy is being undermined.
Yeah. Great. So any other question? Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for the great talk, Vincent. I'm Nargis Neruzi from UC Berkeley. Your work has been visionary and wonderful, both your work and the work of your collaborators. I've been thinking more about assessments recently, and I'm worried about assessment and certification. Given your visionary approach to everything, can you tell us a little bit about your vision for assessment and certification and adaptive assessment?
Well, I think the work I've been doing in K-12, we're mostly relying on external assessment of math, which you may not be very excited about. I'm guessing as background for your question. Yeah, in this kind of work, I think the focus is about getting students to a level of basic competence. And for that, although I would like to have sort of more probing assessments of what students are actually learning and beyond basic skills, if they can work with new problems that they haven't seen before and so forth. Yeah, I must say, I have not focused on that question a great deal, so I'm not sure I have super new insights to share about that.
Thank you. Any, I think in the back. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you very much for the talk. I'm Elena Ilku from TAB in Germany. I would like to understand a bit more how these results are generalizable also outside of US, because US has very specific characteristics related to how rural and city economic factors play a role into the schools, into the kids. So do you have maybe already some insights related to the educational characteristics besides the socio-economical ones, like maybe the background of the kids, if they changed school, which I know that in the US there is not one curricula that they follow, whether they had learning difficulties or learning disabilities, and other educational related characteristics that can be generalizable outside of US?
Yeah, good question. It is anchored in the US context. So it assumes computers in schools and somewhat regular use of those computers. It assumes that there is math learning software or other learning software for other topics where some regular practice by students is useful. And it relies to some degree on bringing new technologies into the classroom. So those are all factors that may not be available everywhere. But then again, the use of tutoring systems, I think, is spreading. It's certainly not even in any way. So that might spread. And if you look sort of behind these different interventions, Yeah, I think what this points to is to whether or not supported by technology is to involve humans and devote more resources to students who have more to learn. I think if we expect them to catch up by themselves, that seems not the way to go. So all of these projects put in something extra. And so I do think that extra should, yeah, maybe in other, I think this could work in other countries for sure, that are similar to the US, but the more different they are, they might, and as we have seen in some of the other keynotes, yeah, there might be very different considerations, very different contexts in which these tutoring systems are used. But nonetheless, this idea that supporting students with goals and rewards, for example, or with just some accountability will turn out to be helpful, and how that could be designed in other contexts is an interesting question. Yeah, I think that's a good question to ask. There is one study with the hybrid human tutoring that did look especially at students with disabilities and found that they were actually better off than other students with this, or at least benefited more from the hybrid human AI tutoring than other students. So, so that shows some promise in that regard.
Okay, I think there's a question here. There are several in the 7. Yeah, raise your hand, please. Yeah.
Hello, Daniel from Khan Academy. Thanks so much for the talk. After hearing it, it's very tempting for myself and for others in the crowd to start implementing more goal setting and self-monitoring, self-reflection data in our products. But I'm curious if you've seen, or through anecdotal or experimental research, if there could be a pitfall here. I believe there's anecdotal evidence to indicate that goal setting can be super effective, just in the ways you've mentioned, until you miss the goal. And when students, you know, rise like a palm tree, fall like a coconut, when they miss those goals, it sometimes will have much worse effect than if they hadn't set a goal to begin with. I think we see that in some edtech software with streaks, and where users who have a 1,000-day streak may, for example, be the highest performing users, but as soon as they lose that streak, they use the product or the edtech software less than someone who never had a streak to begin with. So first, my question is, informal or not, do you think that this is a real pitfall? And if so, is there ways to lessen that danger?
Yeah, nice metaphors, by the way. Well, I think this question has to extent been addressed in the Conrad's dissertation. But partly, there is a lot of support around the goal setting in this, and that was deliberate, but especially based on this observation that meeting goals is kind of contagious. So once the student met their goals, they were much more likely to then meet subsequent goals. So the support from the human tutors and also from this, this sort of midpoint feedback and adjustment form was, I think, designed to address exactly those concerns that you're raising. So where students can adjust their goals and they have some, if too high, for instance, with some blessing from a human tutor, that is probably an important component, or maybe that the form itself also is a sort of implicit approval that they may go lower. That is okay in terms of their goals. What was I going to say? Well, anyway, there's sort of this, so there isn't just goal setting, there's this whole ecosystem around it. And you mentioned streaks, and not to be critical, but that seems like particularly pernicious in a way, because you build up this incredible streak and you can lose it in one day. And that, yeah, that I think runs the risk of, runs some of those risks that you were mentioning, I think. I don't know that from data, but that would be my guess. But so, this is different, like students can adjust as they go.
So we only have time for one more question. If you know Vincent, you can ask him later. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ivona Arroyo from UMass Amherst. Thank you, Vincent, for an amazing talk. And as you know, I admire your work very much. And the ecological perspective and the focus on equity is wonderful. I'm thinking about culture, and there was a workshop on culturally aware tutoring systems, and I'm thinking in the US, in particular, Latinos, as you might know, are the first minority in the United States, and a large percent of the students speak Spanish at homes or other language, but mostly Spanish. And I wonder if you have any results or you know of any results looking particularly at the impact of these ITS or other ITS in Latino students in particular, or and are there any plans of making any of this work bilingual, or do you think it's time to do that?
Well, so going back to the meta-reviews, or this question of whether intelligent tutoring systems help English language learners has been addressed in one of the meta-reviews, so in several studies where they found no specific disadvantage for those students compared to other groups. So that would seem to be positive. We have noticed in the plus context, so this hybrid human-AI tutoring, it has happened a few times that the school had some English language learners, and I believe Spanish was among them, but perhaps also Arabic, where it so happened that the tutor that was assigned, which was a college student, spoke the student's native language, and this seemed like a godsend for the school, that the student could interact about their math learning with somebody who spoke their own language. So I think you raise an important question. There is definitely some evidence in the literature, I think, that intelligent tutoring systems, because they let students work at their own pace, might be helpful. But if you hear these stories, then that makes you think there's probably a lot more that we should do.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I forgot to introduce that Vincent is also editor for the journal AI, which have the impact factor. Now it's 10.1, and many of us try to get our papers published, so talk to him. And also, if you have opinion about the AI review, and come to the panel in the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Vincent.